Hey, I'm Isha. I would just like to say that this whole thing is like really exciting for me, and I'm really honored to be here. And I was super excited to meet you all because I'm actually an aerialist too, and I didn't realize that there was any other like youth aerial dance companies. Technically, I'm not in an aerial dance company, but I've been a part of Destiny Arts for 8 years now, and I'm in the Destiny Arts Youth Performance Company. And through the company, you can do training with Bandaloo to have it be in the show. It's kind of like a mini company, if you will. But I've been doing that for 3 years and I love it so much. So it's exciting to see that there's other young people who are doing that. So I am a co-founder / original member of Youth vs. Apocalypse, which I'm sure that you guys know at least a little bit about, but is a Bay Area climate justice organization. I've been doing that for 3 years now. I'm a senior. I recently committed to Howard University. So I'll be going to Howard in the fall, hopefully, if things open back up. Yeah, I'm from Oakland, born, raised, and educated. And yeah.
What is your favorite pastime or hobby?
What my hobbies are, it's really like hard for me to answer because I feel like, I don't know. Well, dance is definitely a hobby. I like to do that to pass time. But usually on my downtime, I'm doing like self-care because I do a lot. So I like to listen to music and watch Netflix and light sage and write and yeah.
Next question. What would you consider your creative outlet to be?
My like general outlet is dance. I think I really process through dancing and am able, like, I think dance is my therapy. I would be insane if I did not dance. But my creative outlet, I guess that is a creative outlet. I like to write poetry. But I honestly think that I think organizing is also a form of creativity because you're building a movement and it takes a lot of different things and ways of thinking and collaboration, which is what I think the creative process is largely. And like, for instance, so we had to move our next strike, which is supposed to be on Earth Day, April 22nd, to being online. So we decided to create a TikTok challenge. And so for the TikTok challenge, we're also creating a song and a music video. So like, there's definitely a lot of places where I see creativity and art intersecting with activism. And I think that's a really powerful intersection. So I think I went away from the question because I don't really know how to answer it, but that's my answer.
How did you start Youth versus Apocalypse? Like, how did you like get it organized in the beginning?
Mm-hmm. So I never really felt connected to climate justice before I started getting involved with Youth vs. Apocalypse. I thought, environmental activism and climate activism is really portrayed as this very like white kind of like woo-woo hippie thing, or it has been in the past. And I didn't feel connected to that at all. I'd always been really, or social justice had always been a really big part of my life and of my identity and my family, but I didn't associate with climate justice. And then I got connected with a group of young people who were fighting this developer, Phil Tagami, who is trying to build a coal terminal through West Oakland, which is where I live. And so I don't know how familiar you are with West Oakland, but it's a community that is predominantly low income and of color. And that's when I started to understand environmental racism and environmental injustice and how central that is to this fight. And that the people who are most impacted by environmental injustice aren't being adequately represented in the movement, or they weren't. And I think there's still work to be done to make sure that it is that way, but that's when I started feeling connected to that. So I was invited to this action, and that's kind of when I learned all of that. And from that group of young people who started that first campaign, we called it Youth versus Coal, it grew into Youth versus Apocalypse. And we've gone through a lot of changes, and yeah, so that's pretty much the.
That's really cool. Thank you.
How would you describe yourself in 3 words, or what do you think are your most notable characteristics?
I would say driven, goofy, and I think wise. I think I would say I'm pretty wise. I like to think so. My favorite TV show of all time is Psych. I don't know if any of you have. It's such a
I love that show so much.
It touches my heart. I just started rewatching it with my little sister.
So I have a question. What does the word hero mean to you?
You guys ask good questions. To me, a hero is someone who is brave and who is humble and who takes a stand when many are afraid to, and takes a stand when it's needed most in society or for an individual.
Tell us who or what has influenced your leadership choices. A family member, mentor, community member, or something else.
I think I've been really lucky to have really incredible mentors in my life, and also peers who I consider to be mentors. And so I think that my activism, my leadership, who I am, is really influenced by all of the mentors that I've been lucky to have in my life, through dance, through my activism, my family. My grandpa especially has been really influential for me with social justice and getting involved in social movements. My mom, I have a bunch of friends that I've met through my dancing and school that are really close to me and are also very wise and give me a lot of wisdom and guidance. And so I think that I am really inspired by my community, really.
Thank you.
Can you tell us about your work with Youth versus Apocalypse and what you do with them on a day-to-day basis?
So obviously a lot of that has changed because of the global pandemic. But I think what's important to address first is like the mission of Youth versus Apocalypse, or like what we work to do. And so I think there's 2 main goals of YVA that are connected. And so obviously the first one is to stop the climate crisis because we won't be able to live on this planet anymore if we don't do that. But the second piece of that is recognizing this justice piece, like in climate justice, that this climate crisis is the consequence of decades and decades of white supremacy and racism and colonialism that have become so fundamental to how the world, or not have become, that have always been fundamental to how the modern world functions. And that isn't a sustainable way of living. And so it's manifested in this crisis. And so in order to actually stop the climate crisis, we have to recognize that and work to undo those systems of oppression. Because if we don't, we won't be able to stop the climate crisis. So this fight is actually a fight to recreate or rebuild a world that's based on justice and equity instead of injustice and destruction and exploitation. And so I think that that is the main work of Youth vs. Apocalypse, to do that and to spread that message and to really, I think a lot of people get it. They understand intersectionality, but they don't understand that this isn't a piece of the fight. This is the fight. The fight is to dismantle these systems of oppression. It's not like we're gonna save the planet and then we're gonna work on those things later. Like, no, if you don't work on it now and know that this is the fight, then we're never gonna get to the place that we wanna be. And the other piece of that is that in order to achieve that, we have to follow the leadership of people from frontline communities, meaning people from Bayview Hunters Point, people from West Oakland who are on the front line, people from reservations where they're trying to put pipelines, like people who are living day-to-day experiences of being targeted by this injustice. Because if we're not being led by these people, then these systems of oppression will inevitably repeat. And so, yes. So I think, to summarize, the work of YVA is to spread this message of true climate justice and making it a mainstream idea to, or not even a mainstream idea, but, and then also to emphasize the importance of frontline leadership. Yeah. So YVA pre-coronavirus had 3 components. So we're not really a membership-based organization, but we operate these 3 ways. So we have school-based clubs where we have a group of, we say at least 3 people in a school who start a YVA club at their school. And they, usually those clubs work to organize people within their school, and we offer support. And a lot of times those people then become a part of YVA through the fellowship, which I'll talk about in a second, or they just want to get involved through school. So there's those school-based clubs that YVA supports. And then there's the YVA fellowship, which goes from about January to June every year, and is this group of, I think most of them are new activists who come in, and the fellowship is basically a space to get activist training and to plan and execute a project, whatever that may be. It can be an individual project, it can be a group project. So I think the fellowship is really a hub of like helping people come to a place where they can fully organize and like do these big events. I don't think that was the best way to explain it, but there's that. And then there's the YVA Lead Circle, which I'm a part of. I'm also part of the fellowship. But the Lead Circle is a small group of people from YVA who have been in it for a while and who have a big role in making decisions, or not a big role, but we make the decisions for YVA. We decide the campaigns that we want to sign on to, the events that we want to plan, the direction of YVA, answering questions that come up all the time about what is YVA, what does YVA think about this, what are our processes. So that's really how we function. And in terms of like strategy, we organize on we mostly organize locally, but we have a really big impact. We've had some of the biggest strikes in the US, and I think that we've really impacted this global conversation about climate justice. I'm trying to think of like specific strategies that we've come up with. I mean, obviously we've done the climate strikes. We really try to do work in the community. So we organized a community block party to spread information about the Green New Deal. We partnered with Sunrise and did an action at the California Democratic Convention. That's another thing that I forgot to mention. So YVA has a bunch of different campaigns that we're a part of, which is another part of our strategy. So we have the Last Chance Alliance, which is working a lot to target Governor Newsom to ban fracking in California, I believe. And then there's the CalSTRS campaign, which is a lot of students, especially middle school students, who are working to get the California teachers' pension funds divested from fossil fuels, a really cool campaign. And then we have the No Coal campaign, and then we have various others. So I feel like YVA is kind of like a do it all, do what we can, figure it out. Like, it's kind of hard to pinpoint specific things because we're always doing so much.
Okay, so my next question is, what was the turning point in your life that cemented your decision to dedicate your time and energy to this cause? Because I know you talked about your introduction to climate activism, but if there's just like a specific point in time where you were like, okay, this is what I want to do, I have to say.
I feel like I keep having moments like that where it's like, oh, right, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So the first moment was that first action that I ever did that introduced me to climate justice that I was talking about in the beginning. So there was a group of like 15 or 20 young people, and the theme was Christmas in June, and we were dressed up as elves. And we were gonna deliver this really long scroll that had a bunch of signatures from kids in Oakland saying that they didn't want coal for Christmas. And so we went to Phil Tagami's office, and we wound up running into him on his way to the bathroom. And we had this face-to-face interaction with him. And he did the thing that power holders do where they just talk a bunch of nonsense and try to avoid what you're saying. And I had this moment where, he was saying, well, you guys don't have the full story, and like, you don't know, and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay, well then tell us the other side of the story. And I had this very direct interaction with him where he was like right in front of me, and my heart was pounding, and I could tell he was nervous. He was like sweating bullets, and he kept coming closer to me, trying to intimidate me. But I stood on my 10 toes, and I responded, and I addressed what he was saying, and I stood up for myself and my community. And that was the first time I had ever done any sort of direct action. It was the first time that I had been involved in anything climate justice related. And that was a moment where I remember thinking, wow, that was the most powerful thing I've ever done in my life. How can I do more things like this? And I think that was the moment that I realized that activism was important to me and that I needed to be doing that. And then I had a similar moment after, I'm assuming you guys all know about the interaction that I had with Senator Feinstein. No? Okay, so in February of 2019, I was invited to San Francisco because Sunrise Movement had invited me to speak at a rally that they were having. And this was also during the time when the Oakland teachers were on strike. So I didn't have school that day. So I was like, sure, I'll go. And then the rally happens, and then there's a group of young people who want to deliver a letter to Senator Feinstein, who happened to be in her office that day. And so we find our way up to her office somehow, and we have this interaction with her that goes viral on Twitter. And that was when I really shot into this national platform. And that's also was a really big turning point for YVA, where we went from this like pretty small, really, really local group of young people to this still local, but group with a really big platform that's doing powerful work. Not that we weren't doing powerful work before. And so after that, I started doing tons of interviews, and people were like noticing me when I was like going to class at my community college, because I was taking classes there. And like it was just this crazy moment. And I felt so empowered, and that I really had the ability to be an important voice for my people and for the movement, and that I could do something. And ever since then, I just keep having these moments where it's like a reminder of my passion.
That's so amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
What do you hope to be doing 10 years from now?
Thanks.
10 years from now, let's see, I'll be 27. Honestly, I don't know specifically what I want to be doing in 10 years, but I know that whatever I'm doing, wherever I am, I want to be happy, and I want to be fighting for justice and for Mother Earth and for equity and for decolonizing the world and for all the things that I'm already fighting for now, in whatever way that I may be doing it. Yeah.
What would you like to tell youth in the community about their own leadership potential?
I think I would want to tell other young people that you are powerful and you have the ability to make real change. And I want to affirm to them that their voice matters no matter what anybody says, and that your story is yours and you deserve a chance to tell it and to fight for yourself and your family and your community. And I'll also say that this movement needs you. And yeah, keep on shining.
As a youth leader, how are you responding to the COVID-19 health crisis? And what are your ideas for how to get through the crisis?
This is a hard one. As an individual, I'm doing my part to be socially distanced, because I think that that's really important in this time. And to be honest with you, when all of this first started happening, I was like, this is so overrated. Like, people are being so dramatic, blah, 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 blah. And then I realized how actually big of a thing it is. And also that the same communities, low-income communities of color that are disproportionately impacted by climate change, are being disproportionately harmed by COVID-19. And that was really a wake-up moment for me, where I was like, oh yeah, no, this is another one of those things where I got to do my part to make sure that I'm protecting, or doing my part to protect my community. And so I guess the other thing that I'm doing with YVA is, again, like really doing my part to spread this message about, so, okay, let's take a step back. So Carolyn Noor, who is the one of the adult supporters of YVA, and who's a really big mentor for me, used this term a couple weeks ago called threat multipliers, which really sat with me. And basically, a threat multiplier is the idea that these things happen, like climate change or COVID-19, that really exacerbate existing inequalities in society, and that we see that. So for instance, like people who live in low-income communities of color are being disproportionately targeted, like we said before. I don't even know how to explain this correctly right now. My mind just went blank. But basically, the idea is that everything that we're experiencing right now, this crisis, COVID-19, everything is a consequence of this world that we've built on top of injustice and disregard for humanity and living things. And so every time something happens, it's always enforcing those things because that's our foundation. And so I guess the work that I've been doing is to really connect those things so that people see that none of this is separate. It's not like, oh, random bad things keep happening. It's like, no, this is what we've created, and we have to do something. And if we target the foundation, then we can get rid of all of these things.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of immediate change would you like to see in the Bay Area?
Immediate change?
Yes.
I think that if I had a magic wand, the first thing that I would do is I would give every single person adequate housing and access to living wages and healthcare. That's a lot, but these are basic necessities. Like, why do we not have this already? And the other thing is that I would enact rent forgiveness during this time, because so many people can't pay their rent right now and are choosing, even before this crisis, we're choosing between putting food on the table or paying their rent. And that's not something that anyone should have to be having to choose between, especially when they're working 2 or 3 jobs. Like, why is that a thing? So I think, we've enacted this, what is it called? Eviction freeze, but we need more than that. We can't just stop people from being evicted, because what happens after this is over, people still don't have that money to pay. So I think those are some things. There's definitely a lot more that I could do, but I'll stick with that.
I have a follow-up question. What kind of political policies, according to with environmental justice, do you think that we can change? Is something that's very attainable for us to change?
So that's a difficult question. I'm not an expert on like specific policy. I know other people in YVA who know a lot more than me, but I always am advocating for the Green New Deal, which really isn't a policy platform, but is the framework for creating policy that gets the job done, basically. And so I would really like to see a Bay Area Green New Deal. And part of the thing that's really cool about the Green New Deal is it gives opportunity for people living in the community to decide what that looks like for them or for us. So that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see policy that's created by people who are living here, to get us to 0 greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, to reverse white supremacy and racism and colonialism, and to get people jobs and housing and healthcare and all of these basic human necessities that we should already have.
Okay, I have a question. Is there anything else you feel that we need to know about your work that you haven't said already?
I guess I would just say that there's a place in this movement for everyone. And you don't have to be a person who likes to get on stages and lead chants and do interviews. You can be a person who likes to make graphics, and that is an equally important job in this movement. You can be someone that knows how to fundraise, because we definitely need money to make this thing happen. You can be someone that likes to sing or dance, or whatever your passions are needed in this movement, and you can do it, and we need you. I think right now, this is the most that I've really brought my like dance life and activist life together. They've never really been separate, but with creating this TikTok challenge, it's actually a lot more than I thought it was gonna be. So I've been coordinating a lot of people who are like making choreography and writing verses for songs, and making music videos and stuff like that. So I think that's where I've really seen art being impactful. Well, I guess we haven't seen the impact of it yet, but I do think that it will have a big impact, especially now. People need to get up and move their bodies and be creative. I guess another thing I would say that might not be like an actual answer to this question, but I really think that my training as an artist and a performer has allowed me to be as successful as an activist as I am, because artists think differently than everyone else. We have a different, there's just something, we process differently. We process through our bodies, or through writing, or through singing, or whatever. And I think that in times, especially when we're needing to rebuild and recreate, we need people with creative minds to be able to get the job done. And also, just with my experience performing and being on stage, has really developed a stage presence. And so I've been able to get on stages in front of thousands of people and speak my mind just how I am right now. And I think that that is really because of my training as a performer. So I think that, yeah.
Then, related to that, how long have you worked with Bandaloo, and how often do you dance with them?
Mm-hmm. Oh, Bandaloo. I miss being in the studio so much. Like, so much. So I've worked with Bandaloo for 3 years now. And I train with them. I was training with them 2 days a week. And I actually started, so usually we'd just work in the studio, and we would do stuff on the wall. We do wall pieces. But this year we wanted to go outside and do it on a building. So we started doing more practices like that, and we were practicing on the Bruner Wall in downtown Oakland. I don't know if y'all know that, but that was cool. But that got vetoed real quick. So we still meet on Zoom once a week. But that's about it. Well, first of all, I have to have a calendar. I have to have a calendar. I have like 3 calendars. I have this calendar, I have one on my computer, one on my phone. Yeah, there's just a lot of calendars. I also have a really great support system that I feel really blessed to have, which is how I balance a lot of it. And the other thing is just practicing time management. But it's not an exact science, and it is a constant process for me, to be honest. I definitely can take on too much sometimes. But I think I also just thrive in fast-paced, like, let's go environments. And so as much as I'll be like, oh, I have so much to do, I'm loving it and I'm thriving. And there's definitely moments where I like break down for a second, but then I get back up and I just keep doing it. She was not receptive to what we were saying at all. And she was very she said things like, so we went to her office because we wanted her to vote yes on the Green New Deal. And she was like, that's not going to pass in Senate. It's too pricey. It's too ambitious. Like, that's not going to happen. She basically said that she didn't have to listen to me because I didn't vote for her. And just a lot of stuff like that. But even though that interaction was really disappointing, it was a really important moment, not only for me, but just I think for the world, because after that, there was this almost like normalizing of the Green New Deal. And what I mean by that is like people heard it so much and they started learning more about what it was, and it became more a part of the mainstream media than it had been before. And it also gave Youth versus Apocalypse and me and many other organizations a really big platform to organize and to get our voices out there. Yeah.